Good morning, Olive, Arlo, and Frank. Grandpap coming to you from the living room in Jack's Beach, watching a beautiful sunrise outside. The lighting's a little bit odd, but whatever. Today, I want to talk to you about a subject that is near and dear to my heart. In fact, today I'm launching a series of videos. There's going to be 10, at least that's the plan. And it's called Invite Shakespeare into Your Life. I didn't always have Shakespeare in my life, although I kind of had some of them in there as far back as high school when we read Julius Caesar. I think in ninth grade. But I certainly have them in my life now. And we'll get into that. We'll develop that over this next 10 videos. The first thing that I want to talk about is the fact that Shakespeare, I mean, it's difficult. If you listen to some of it, you go like, what? What is going on here? He wrote for a late 16th to early 17th century audience. He didn't write for you and me. So Shakespeare was writing roughly from around, I think, 1590 to 1612. I think that was the time period. And he wrote to the people that day. He wrote to the upper crust of society, all the way down to the common man, to the rowdy, get drunk on Friday night common man, and everybody in between. But they were from back then. And when he wrote, he probably thought, well, people do my plays for a while and then that's it. He never suspected that we would still be watching his plays today. But an amazing thing happened. Every generation that takes on Shakespeare, puts on the plays, makes movies, whatever, writes books about Shakespeare, they put Shakespeare into their time. Into their cultural norms. And he's easy to do that with. It's amazing. That being said, their history, they're historical. Now, some of them are called history plays, like Julius Caesar. And Shakespeare wasn't a historian. I don't mean it that way. I mean that you have to put these into a historical perspective. And you can learn a lot about, not so much history. You'll learn a little bit about history, but it's history that's stretched here and there to make the story better. But you'll learn a lot about people back in that day. Now, that being said, the reason that people can shoehorn Shakespeare into the current societal norms, cultural norms, like these days, there's people that make the argument that, oh, Shakespeare was a feminist. Shakespeare was pro-transgender, which if you said transgender to Shakespeare, he wouldn't understand the concept. They didn't have all that back then. So, but you can look at little things in there and go, yeah, he's on the same page as I am. That being said, he understood a lot of things that are still very, very relevant today. And we're going to develop some of those as we go through these 10. Now, I do want to start kind of by saying this. If you're sitting there and you go, oh, Shakespeare, yeah, that's cool. As a matter of fact, there's a Shakespeare play being played. They're doing Hamlet tonight at the such and such playhouse. I'm going to get a ticket and I'm going to go over there and watch me some Shakespeare. You're going to have a horrible time. You're going to be sitting there going, I don't understand this. I don't understand what they're saying. I don't understand what they're doing. I don't understand why they're doing it. You're going to have a horrible time. So there's some things that you need to do. And the first is you need to read the play. But that's hard. So when I say the first is, I shouldn't say the first. Let me back up a second. Prior to going to see the play, you need to read the play. And you're not going to understand the play when you read it. Even you, Frank, I mean, you're 22 years old. You're a grown man. You read probably at whatever college level. You're going to read it and go, this is the most boring thing I ever read in my life. I have no idea what this is saying. So you have to learn what the play means, what the language means, and things like that as you're reading the play. Now, the first thing you have to do is figure out what version you're going to read of the play. So I read from this one, The Complete Pelican Shakespeare. And I got this just because it was inexpensive. I bought it used. And it has every play and the sonnets, the poems. It has everything in there. And that's what I read from. I don't take Shakespeare out with me. Like if I'm going on a trip tomorrow, Darlo, I'm not going to bring this giant book with me to your house. So I'm limited in what I can do. You can buy the individual plays, paperback, fairly inexpensive, but you have to make sure that there's notes in there that tell you what certain words mean. And pick up Shakespeare and read some, and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, there are all kinds of aids to understanding Shakespeare. Like I'm getting ready on the 20th, the day after I get back from your house, Arlo, to go see the Comedy of Errors in Orlando. So one of the things that I've done is I've read this, a short guide to Shakespeare's plays, and it just tells you briefly, like, hey, this is what this means. You know, this is the plot of the play. There's another one, Sparks Notes. There's, I'm sure Cliff Notes has a Shakespeare 101 kind of thing too, and it has a plot summary. This develops the characters to a certain extent. I give you a list of the main characters anyway, and say, okay, this is kind of this where this person fits in. Now here's a good one. This is an old book that I picked up at a used bookstore. It's called Tales from Shakespeare, and you can open this up, and it's got very small print, but it lists some of the plays, and then it tells you the story in modern English, like Romeo and Juliet, Lear, and Othello, Macbeth. We're going to be looking at all those, Hamlet, all the big the biggies. We're going to be taking a look at in some detail. The next thing is um, Shakespeare. This is Eyewitness Shakespeare. And it has all kinds of stuff in here. Like it tells you about, I don't know what the dog has to do with anything, but this part of London where they used to put on the plays was famous for something called bear baiting. And they would take a bear, somehow they would take its teeth out. And it's horrible that you would do this to an animal. But um, they would tie it to a post, and then it was some sort of a game that they would bet on. I forget how they did it. Now, a lot of things in Shakespeare, the war in the play. So here's, like in this Eyewitness Shakespeare, there's all kinds of stuff about the places that you read in the play. Also, we recently had a pandemic here. Pandemics have gone throughout history. So you have stories about plagues. And now, when I was in London last year, I went to the Globe Theatre, which was the most famous theater that Shakespeare played in. He also played in a place called the Blackfriars. But there's a replica of the Globe, and it pretty much looks just like this. And grandmother and I went to see Lear. It talks about how they would stage plays. And this is all like really good information. Here's a guy with his head chopped off. It shows how they make it look like his head's chopped off. They would, to stage Hamlet, you have to have a skull, because he holds up a skull and talks to it. It's a guy named York. Here's another interesting one. And we'll look at this in some of the plays anyway. That is the fact that it, back then, I don't know if it was actually illegal for women to be in the plays, but they weren't. So they would have young men dress up as women and play the women in the plays. And this goes through how they made that happen. And then it talks about the audience. So there's seats. It's kind of almost like theater in the round, but it doesn't go all the way around. It's like a semicircle going a little more than 180 degrees. And you sit in these tiered rows that go back and up. But there's also a place, I think it's called the infield, where the common people would go. And they were rowdy. So this shows like what these people were like. They're throwing apples, to drinking grog, and the coin there must be how much it costs. So there's all these things, and you should read these kind of things, read books like this, because knowing more um, about the plays is one thing, but knowing the background about the culture that caused these plays to happen, that is a wealth of knowledge. It just makes everything better. So this is how to find out more about Shakespeare, so that it's a wealth of information, places to visit, and it talks about going to Stratford upon Avon, which I did. Your grandmother did not go with me. She is not a Shakespeare buff like your grandpop is. Okay, next up, I have all these papers here. Shakespeare's life and world. And now this book is more like smaller pictures and stuff, and a lot more words in it. And it goes into all kinds of things. I wanted to show you this. This is Falstaff. See the fat guy over there in front of the window? This is the Boar's Head Tavern outside of London, where Prince Hal, this is Henry IV, Part 1. Prince Hal was eventually going to be King Henry V, but he's hanging out with these scallywags. And the head scallywag is a man named Sir John Falstaff. He's just a fat drunk. I love him. So there's those kind of things. So we've looked at two types of books so far. One is a book that explains the plays. The next is books that explains the backgrounds. Then we're going to look at another set of books, and it's books on various subjects, but they all make the plays more alive. They all help you understand. So Shakespeare's knowledge and use of the Bible. The Bible that Shakespeare used, I forget the name of it. The King James Bible didn't come out till 1611, and that was at the twilight of his career. So he didn't use that one. I've read some stuff in the actual one. I used to have it downloaded on my computer. The Bible that he used. He references the Bible all the time. So you'll have more of an understanding if you're reading a play, if you have a book like that and you can look it up. Like oh, okay, this is in this play, these are the times that he references the Bible. And so you'll be going over there, you'll stop reading the play and go over there. The next book is a book this is history, and it's the Year of Lear. It's Shakespeare in 1606 during the plague. And I read this during the COVID-19 plague. And this talks about how he wrote Lear, and he wrote some other things too during this year, that they closed the theaters down. And so he wrote Lear during this year. And Lear, we're going to do a whole video on Lear. Very interesting. We're going to talk about madness. Lear is an old king who devolves into madness. But at the same time that he's doing this and writing this play, there is a plot against, I think it's King James. It's called the Gunpowder Plot. They try to blow up some building like the Parliament building or something. And they wind up catching the people. It's not successful. They don't blow anything up. I don't think they kill anybody. But they get killed. They get captured and sentenced to die. The next is Shakespeare's body. So this is the opposite end from Shakespeare's use of the Bible. This tells you all the lewd and lascivious things, sexual innuendo, and like crude talk. One thing, and we'll talk about this from time to time, is the common people are the ones in Shakespeare's plays who use all kinds of words that you've never heard of. The high class people, the kings and queens, and the people in the courts, they use pretty much the same English that we do. But the bawdy, the commoners, like the guy, the woman's got the apples to throw, and the guy's drinking grog in the theater. He wrote to them too. He wrote to everybody. So they would go there, and they needed to be fed some innuendo because they were kind of crude people. And here's one that's really wonderful. It's called How to Think Like Shakespeare. Lessons from a Renaissance Education. This talks about how Shakespeare was taught in school. And it teaches you how to think like people who were taught in school back then. I highly recommend this. Even if you don't invite Shakespeare into your life, I highly recommend this book. Also, I have things on the great courses. Great courses are these college level series of lectures by top-notch scholars from all over not all over the world, really. U.S. and Canada and England. The English-speaking world, we'll say. And there are things like Shakespeare, comedies, histories, and tragedies, how to read and understand Shakespeare, Shakespeare's tragedies, and then another one which is very interesting, which is called Experiencing Shakespeare from Page to Stage. So this lady, I forget where she teaches, she has an actor and an actress, and they actually show you from them just reading it to each other to get a feel for the play, for the script, to being dressed and putting on the play in front of an audience, how that goes. So I know what you're thinking. Grandpa, I'm never going to invite Shakespeare into my life because, and I had mentioned this before, the language is just too darn difficult. Well, like I said, the common people, the ones who used all kinds of strange verbiage, the, the, the district where plays were put on was not the upper crust district. Like right now, if you go to the Globe in London, you would not be able to afford to rent a flat, as they call them, anywhere near that place because it's very, very expensive. But that side of the Thames River back then was the bawdy district. It was where the houses of prostitution were, where they did those horrible outdoor gambling things like the bear baiting, dog fighting, those kind of things. Stuff that the upper echelon, they weren't involved in that. But that's where you had to go to to watch Shakespeare. So there's a lot of this language in the play. And it's well worth your while to learn what a lot of the stuff says. Now, you are already very familiar with a lot of language that was actually invented by Shakespeare. He invented a fairly large percentage of our language. No other author has done anywhere near what Shakespeare did to enrich the English language with new words. People talk about James Joyce, but a lot of the stuff that James Joyce did, it didn't stick. It just was made up words. Some of it did. And Joyce was a great, great writer. I recently did a thing about Bloomsday, June 16th, but I digress. So I'm going to need to read these, but as I say, you're well familiar with Shakespearean language, some of it. This is kind of a long list, but it's nothing compared to the complete list. So, do you ever quote him? Do you ever quote Shakespeare? I bet you do. Have you ever said, all that glitters is gold, or all the world's a stage, or the be all and end all, or break the ice? Did you ever say break the ice? I used to run meetings all the time, and you would try to have an icebreaker. Now, he didn't say icebreaker, but that comes from breaking the ice. And we would break the ice. That's a Shakespearean word. Did you ever say that somebody breathed their last? Brevity is the soul of wit, or clothes make the man. Did you ever catch a cold? Did you ever tell someone they're eating you out of house and home? And trust me, I'm sure, Frank, you've been told that. You're eating me out of house and home. Arlo, you will be told that. Olive, maybe you too. Did you ever want a better seat on an airplane so you have more elbow room? Have you ever said, Every dog has his day. Or something is a foregone conclusion. Or frailty. Thy name is woman. Did you ever give the devil his due? Or describe someone as having a heart of gold? Or being hot-blooded? All Shakespearean language. Have you ever been heartsick? Have you ever done housekeeping? Have you ever said, that's Greek to me? Or used any of these terms? Lackluster, leapfrog, live long day. I've been working on the railroad all the live long day. There's a method in his madness. Mind's eye, ministering angel, more sinned against than sinning. Naked truth, neither a borrower nor a lender be. One fell swoop, pitched battle, primrose path, strange bedfellows. The lady doth protest too much. To thine own self be true. Too much of a good thing. Wear one's heart on one's sleeve. Or the witching time of night. And we usually say that the witching hour. It's the witching hour. So it's very, very colorful and descriptive language. He invents words and he makes expressions that have stuck. So when you go to a play, you're going to have to take all this in. And that's the be all to end all, to quote Shakespeare. The be all to end all is to go see a play in person. Yeah, it's cool to watch a movie. There's a couple movies that I've liked. A lot of them are boring. A lot of them are old with stuffy people. Because the language is how Shakespeare paints a picture. Now, if you see a movie of Shakespeare, when the army of England goes into battle against the French and Henry V, they're going to have like all these people on horses and all that. That's not the way that the plays were done originally. And if you go to see a play, they almost always are done very, very simply. There's no elaborate scenery and there's no elaborate costumes. You watch a movie, they'll have 150 soldiers dressed in elaborate costumes, period soldiers. It wasn't like that back then. Now, the play that I'm going to see in Orlando, it's playing for, I think, about 45 days. Several times a week, they'll put that play on. They do the same play over and over and over again. And then they go on to the next play. So probably, and there's nothing I want to see later this year, but probably sometime in 2024, I'll go back down there. It's called Orlando Shakes. And I'll go see a play. But back in Shakespeare's day, they were concurrently doing around 20 plays at a time. They would do them at the Globe, the Blackfriars, a couple other places. They would take them on the road. They would go to cities and towns and villages all over England, and they would put on the plays. So if somebody was a queen, there was a queen outfit for that person, and whether they were, um, the wife of Henry V or Lady Macbeth or whoever, that's what they wore, and usually the same person played that part. So when you go to a play, You'll have all this background knowledge because you've read a synopsis of the play. You've read the books that show what life was like back then, to put it into cultural perspective, and you will have and when you go to the play, there's something called a playbill, and I'll be showing you a couple playbills soon that is going to tell you about the play. So it's going to tell you a little bit about what the play is about, but it's going to tell you about the people in the play, and that's all fascinating stuff too, as I'll get into more. So now you're sitting at the play. You're in the audience. Let your imagination go wild. Just sit there and take it in. You're not going to understand everything, but take it in. And when you're sitting there going, well, wait a minute, this is supposed to be this giant battle, but there's only 10 people on stage. Take the bard's advice, and that's one of the things they called Shakespeare. He said this in Henry V, and I'm reading from the big book here. He said this in the prologue. Oh, for a muse of fire that would ascend the brightest heaven of invention, a kingdom for a stage, princes to act, and monarchs to behold the swelling scene. Then should the warlike Henry, like himself, and this is from Henry V, so this is that guy, Prince Hal, but now he's grown up and he's getting ready to go into battle against the French in France. So this is saying this is how to watch this play, but it's also saying this is how to watch all the plays. Then should the warlike Harry, like himself, assume the port of Mars. Mars is the god of war in Roman mythology. And at his heels, leashed in like hounds, should famine, sword, and fire crouch for employment. But pardon, gentle all, the flat, unraised spirits that have dared on this unworthy scaffold to bring forth so great an object. Can this cockpit, and they're talking about the theater, can this cockpit hold the vasty fields of France? Or maybe we cram within this wooden O, and that's the shape of it. It's O-shaped. The very casts that affright the air at Agincourt. And Agincourt's where this big battle is going to take place. Oh, pardon, since a choked figure may attest in little place a million, and let us ciphers to this great account. So cipher is to count. On your imaginary forces work. Suppose within the girdle of these walls are now confined two mighty monarchies, whose high upredded and abutting fronts, the perilous narrow ocean parts asunder. So he's saying, like, on this stage, there's just a few people. But using your imagination, you can imagine these two powerful governments getting ready to go to war with each other and sending thousands of men into battle. Piece out our imperfection with your thoughts. Into 1,000 parts divide one man and make imaginary puissance or puissance. And I don't know what puissance means. Poisson, poissons have something to do with fish in French. Think when we talk of horses that you see them printing their proud hoofs. So printing must be like banging them down, receiving on the receiving earth. For 'tis your thoughts that now must deck our kings, carry them here and there, jumping over times, turning the accomplishment of many years into an hourglass, for the which supply. Admit me, chorus, to this history, who prologue like your humble patience, pray, gently to hear, kindly to judge our play. So it tells you we're describing a great battle, but we only have a few people and limited scenery. So you have to use your imagination. And when you do that, the play's going to be much better. You don't want to sit there going like, man, they should have more scenery. They should change the scenery more often. And in modern plays, they do change scenery. Back then, they didn't. So one thing is not only are you familiar with some of the language of Shakespeare, but you're most likely now, Olive and Arlo, you're not, but Frank, you are, that you know some of the famous speeches, soliloquies, things like that from Shakespeare. Everybody knows to be or not to be. The most famous speech in English, in the English language, is a speech that Shakespeare kind of made up. Now, uh, some form of the speech was given, but it was the friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ear. And we're going to look at that speech in detail the next time because we're going to be doing Julius Caesar. It was based on historical events, but Shakespeare worked that into a magnificent speech that people remember. You say that to people and they'll go, oh, Julius Caesar. And he did it to make a point, to show how you could take this crowd that was there to love, to this crowd who had loved Caesar. And now they had been told Caesar was a tyrant and had to be killed. And Marcus Antonius takes that, and through rhetoric, he swings that crowd around so that they become aligned with him and they love Caesar again, even though he's dead. And the triumvirate of people, led, I guess, by Marcus Brutus, was the unkindest cut of all. He focuses them on them and saying, okay, you want to get these guys, and they have to flee Rome. Now, everybody knew that that didn't happen exactly the same way that they're listening to it, but this is part of the imagination. You don't want to sit there in the theater and go, yeah, I don't think this is historically correct. Just listen, let your imagination go wild, and let Shakespeare's words take you where he wants to take you. I mentioned to be or not to be. We're gonna look at that also. That's another one that everybody knows, to be or not to be. When we were in England, I think I was at the Royal Shakespeare Company up in Stratford upon Avon, and we had bought a shirt that had French cuffs, and I saw these cufflinks, and on one side it said to be, and on the other side it said not to be, and I bought them because everybody needs to be or not to be cufflinks. So one thing that I mentioned a little while ago is that when you go to see the play, and you need to do that, you, you study the background, you look at you read the play, you read the things that tell you what the play means. Now you want to go see the play. You want to see people actually do this right in front of you. In London, I went to see King Lear, and this is the playbill, and it just tells you all kinds of things about the globe, the play. This is King Lear, but it was played by this old lady in a wheelchair. Now she could walk. She was the kind of person who would, like, if she went to the supermarket, she could drive her car up, get out of the car, and walk to the supermarket, but then be in one of those motorized carts to get around the supermarket. And so this is a modern thing where not only can women be in the plays, but they can play men's parts, like outwardly play men's parts. It is what it is. It's not good or it's not bad. It's what they do. That this was an excellent production of Lear, and she played Lear pretty well. Most of the time, she was wheeling herself around in the wheelchair, and then and every once in a while she'd pop out of it, and say something. But you could tell that she labored to do that. Then in the Royal Shakespeare Company, I went to see Richard III. Richard III was a kind of an evil guy. This dude here is playing him, and he has, if you notice, his one hand here, that one, is deformed. So as he walked around the stage, his hand would go. Now, Richard III was actually, um, he was disabled. He was a hunchback. They called him the Crookback, Richard Crookback. But these, I don't want to go through these things that it's 8 o'clock. Time to take my morning pills. But like here, it has the House of the Plantagenets. So I think that's the Henrys and the Richards of the English monarchy. And you always want to grab these when you go. Take them home. They're a great keepsake, but read them before the play. I have favorite plays. We're going to wrap this up pretty soon. I have favorite plays, and they are like Romeo and Juliet. And I have favorite speeches in my favorite plays. The Palmer speech, where they put their hands up, Romeo and Juliet put their hands up the night that they meet. Palm to palm. It's called the Palmer Speech. It's beautiful. We're going to look at that when we do Romeo and Juliet in a couple videos from now. Hamlet, to be or not to be. We're going to look at that. Henry the Fourth, Part 1. Just an amazing play. That's the one with Prince Hal and Sir John Falstaff, and they're scalawags. They hang out at this bar. They get drunk. They go out and rob people, and the Prince of England, the heir apparent to the throne, is one of these guys. But I'm not gonna do a spoiler alert right now. We'll get into it. I have favorite characters. Juliet. Juliet is it's called Romeo and Juliet, but Romeo is just like a young scatterbrained man. He, like in most relationships, she's the brains of the operation, and she's probably like somewhere between 13 to 16 years old. Hamlet. Hamlet is a very complex character. We're going to do a whole video on Hamlet, and we'll look at him in detail. The Prince of Denmark. Falstaff. I love him. Big fat drunk. Just a cool guy. There's a guy named Malvolio in Twelfth Night, and we're going to do Twelfth Night. We're going to do a video on that. He's a stick in the mud, I guess. I don't know if that's a Shakespearean quote. He's I don't know how to say it in a nice way. He's a buzzkill, and people play tricks on him and stuff, and that's a very complex play with a lot of different levels, a lot of plots going on simultaneously. But we're going to look at that now. Shakespeare also wrote poems, and we're going to look at the poems and sonnets in one of the videos. In fact, it's the last one. It'll be video 10. So we have the Rape of Lucrece and Venus and Adonis. Here's the list of plays that we're going to do. Julius Caesar. Caesar had just crossed the Rubicon, which is what we've done in the United States today. So this play, and when it's put on, it's put on in the current perspective, whatever that is, and wherever they're putting the play on. Like when they make a movie of it, it'll be about that time, not whatever it was, something BC, 60 BC, whenever that was. And it's about a time that the Roman Empire had less freedom, but they were happier. But the empire was dying. The next video 3, we're going to do Romeo and Juliet, then Henry the Fourth, Part 1, then Twelfth Night. We talked about these. And then we're going to do The Tempest. The Tempest is a really cool play about these people getting shipwrecked on an island, like a magical island with this wizard kind of dude on it. And then in the next one, number 7, we're going to look at racism. We're going to look at 2 plays in this. We're going to look at The Merchant of Venice and Othello. Othello was a black dude. He was a Moor, and he's mistreated because of what he looks like and who he is. The Merchant of Venice is about actually anti-Semitism, which is racism. It's just racism against Jews. There's a moneylender named Shylock in it, and So we're going to look at anti-Semitism. Then next, we're going to look at two plays that deal with madness. And actually, Hamlet deals with madness to a certain extent, but these really focus on madness. And that's Lear and Macbeth, two of the epic tragedies. The ninth, we're going to do Hamlet, deep dive into Hamlet. And then the 10th one, we're going to do the poems and sonnets. And I'm losing my voice. So until the next one, peace out.